In the vast darkness of space, countless civilizations have learned one fundamental truth the hard way. The universe rewards mercy only to those who understand the cost of mercy. The Caltier Dominion believed themselves invincible, a species that had conquered 17 systems and brought 100 worlds to their knees. They had encountered resistance before. They had crushed rebellions. They had enslaved populations and extracted resources without consequence. But they had never encountered Earth, and they had certainly never encountered a human mother's rage. This is the story of what happens when apex predators mistake prey for weakness. This is the story of the day that changed everything. The morning of the abduction began like any other Thursday on Earth. Sarah Chen stood in her kitchen on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, watching her 7-year-old son Marcus eat his cereal while cartoon characters danced across the television screen. The sun filtered through the windows in golden strips, and the house carried that specific warmth of early autumn. Marcus swung his legs back and forth, not quite touching the floor, his dinosaur-patterned socks a flash of color against the chair. Sarah had named him Marcus because it meant dedicated to Mars. And from the moment he was born, he had been completely dedicated to asking endless questions about everything. Why was the sky blue? How did plants make food? Could dogs taste colors? It had been 7 years of beautiful, exhausting curiosity. Sarah worked as a neurobiologist at the Cascadia Research Institute, specializing in human cognitive development. Her work fascinated her because it allowed her to understand not just how humans learned, but why they learned the way they did. She had published 3 papers on the neurological basis of human adaptability, and she had one simple driving force in her career: understanding what made humans so fundamentally capable of change and survival. Marcus, in many ways, was her greatest research subject. He absorbed information like nothing she had ever seen, making connections between seemingly unrelated concepts that often left her stunned. That morning, Marcus asked her about the stars. Not why they existed, he had already covered that topic, but whether anyone else was out there looking back at them. Sarah had smiled and given him the standard answer: "We did not know yet, but scientists were always searching." She had ruffled his hair, kissed the top of his head, and sent him off to school in his blue backpack with the little rockets sewn onto the pockets. It was a decision she would replay in her mind 1,000 times in the days that followed, wondering if she should have held him longer, wondered if somehow she had sensed something that morning that should have warned her. The Calthier Dominion's scouting vessel had been monitoring Earth for 6 rotations. The Calthier were reptilian creatures standing nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that shimmered between deep purple and black depending on the light. They were not explorers, they were resource evaluators. A solar system had been added to their expansion list, and Earth, with its abundant water, mineral wealth and biologically diverse ecosystem, had been flagged as potentially valuable. The Caltier did not see worlds as homes. They saw them as assets to be processed and distributed among the Dominion's elite castes. The scouting team had been instructed to gather intelligence on the dominant species and assess the threat level. Their preliminary analysis was troubling. Humans possessed nuclear weapons and had achieved spaceflight, albeit primitive spaceflight. But the Calthier had seen much of both before. Nuclear weapons were old technology in the galactic context. Spaceflight without hyperdrive capability was merely a stepping stone. The Dominion's own defenses could withstand nuclear strikes. More importantly, the Dominion had never encountered unified planetary resistance that they could not overcome. Their military technology was centuries ahead of Earth's. Commander Vexthar of the Calthier Dominion had made a decision that would be remembered as catastrophic. To gather biological data on the human species, they would need specimens. Specimens could be acquired several ways, but the most efficient method was through targeted abduction. Weak specimens were useless for study. The ideal specimen would be one who could demonstrate humanity's full range of psychological responses to stress and captivity. Commander Vexthar selected a target: a single young human, isolated from its family. Young organisms often possessed adaptive responses that older ones did not. A young human would be intellectually developing, capable of learning new concepts, and therefore a perfect subject for their studies. At 3:47 in the afternoon, the parking lot of Evergreen Elementary School existed in that specific kind of chaos that came with pickup time. Parents with strollers mixed with teenagers with their phones out. Bus drivers waved children on, and the crossing guard stood at her post in her bright yellow vest. The autumn sun was beginning to sink lower, and the shadows between the trees grew longer. Marcus came out of the building with his best friend Devon, both of them laughing about something that had happened in gym class. His backpack bounced against his shoulders and his shoes were untied, as they always were by the end of the day. Sarah was waiting by the car, as she always was. She stood with her hip against the driver's side door, scrolling through emails on her phone. When Marcus saw her, his face broke into that brilliant smile that made her forget every difficult moment of parenthood. He waved goodbye to Devon and began jogging toward her, his shoelaces flapping. The Calthea extraction vessel descended from the upper atmosphere in a motion so quick that it was barely detected by any human instrument. The beam it sent down was precise, calibrated to target a single biological signature. Marcus felt a strange, tingling sensation, the world around him suddenly becoming strange and blurred. He tried to call out to his mother, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Sarah heard the sound first, a sound like something between a hum and a scream, a sound that human ears were not designed to process. She looked up just in time to see her son's body begin to glow with a faint blue light. For a single moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, their eyes met. She saw the confusion and fear in his expression, the way his hand reached out toward her. She moved forward, trying to reach him. But the light suddenly intensified and Marcus was gone. The sound cut off abruptly. Around the parking lot, other parents and children stood frozen, watching the place where a child had been standing moments before. Sarah's scream brought everyone back to reality. It was a sound of pure, primal loss. She fell to her knees where her son had been standing, her hands grasping at the air, as if she could somehow pull him back from wherever he had gone. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside her. The neurobiologist, the researcher who studied the human mind, felt her mind reorganize itself around a single, crystalline purpose. Her son was gone. And if the universe had taken him, the universe would have to give him back. The Calthea examination bay aboard the flagship was a sterile place of cold metal and strange instruments. Young Marcus Chen regained consciousness on a table, surrounded by enormous creatures with scales and multiple arms. For exactly 43 seconds, he was afraid. The fear bypassed higher cognitive function and activated pure survival instinct. He screamed. His small human body thrashed against the examination table, his legs kicking out in a desperate primal attempt to escape. Then, something unusual happened. Marcus's mind, that brilliant, curious mind that had spent 7 years absorbing the world around him, activated its adaptive response. His fear did not disappear, but it was joined by something else. Questions. Where was he? What were these creatures? Why had they taken him? His crying stopped as his brain shifted from panic to analysis. The Calthea observers, scanning his neural activity, were astonished. The human child's cortisol levels were lowering. His fear response was being voluntarily suppressed. His prefrontal cortex was activating despite his youth and despite his circumstances. Commander Vic Star observed the data with satisfaction. This specimen would be valuable indeed. Meanwhile on Earth, Sarah moved with purpose that frightened everyone around her. She contacted the military first, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. She told them what she had seen. They wanted to classify it, to investigate quietly, to proceed with careful protocols. Sarah had a degree in neurobiology, and she understood the human tendency toward bureaucratic caution. She also understood that caution was a luxury she did not have. She contacted the media. Within 6 hours, the story was everywhere. Child abducted by unidentified craft. Within 12 hours, the story had evolved. Possible alien abduction in Portland. The global response was immediate and overwhelming. Humanity's reaction to the confirmation of extraterrestrial contact was not fear. It was anger. For centuries, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. The answer, when it finally came, arrived in the form of an attack on a 7-year-old child. It did not matter that the Calthea had not intended to provoke. They had attacked, they had taken, and they had miscalculated the human response. In laboratories and military facilities around the world, scientists and strategists worked around the clock. The Calthea vessel had left a trail. Radiation signatures, subspace distortions, gravimetric anomalies. Sarah, using her security clearance and her expertise in pattern recognition, found herself in classified briefings alongside military officers and astrophysicists. She was not a trained operative, but she was something far more dangerous. She was a mother with nothing left to lose and a brilliant mind focused on a single goal. The analysis of the Calthea vessel took 3 days. The technology was advanced, but it was not perfect. Its shielding had left traces. Its propulsion signature was identifiable. Most importantly, the direction it had traveled after the abduction was traceable. The Calthea had returned to their ship in orbit around Jupiter, to a flagship-class vessel that had been hidden in the radiation shadow of the great planet. Humanity had found their target. Sarah made a decision that surprised no one who knew her. She volunteered to be part of the first contact team. Her expertise in cognition and behavior made her valuable. But more than that, no military official could talk her out of it. She was going to find her son. That was not negotiable. The human response, which came 17 days after Marcus's abduction, was unlike anything the Calthea had anticipated. Humanity had not developed advanced weapons in the way the Dominion expected. Instead, humanity had deployed something far worse. Humans. 17 soldiers in powered combat armor, developed in record time from military and civilian innovations. 17 soldiers piloted by humans who were united in a single purpose: retrieve the child and remind the universe why you do not target human young. But more than that, humanity had deployed its most sophisticated weapon, its ability to spread information. The Calthea had believed themselves unknown to Earth's general population. Within hours of the first contact, they discovered that Earth had no such ignorance. Humanity knew exactly who they were, where they came from, and what they wanted. Every news organization on Earth was broadcasting the coordinates of their vessel. Every forum and social media platform was filled with humanity's response to their invasion. Outrage, defiance, and the kind of focused aggression that only came when you threatened something humanity protected above all else. The Calthea had believed they understood combat. They had believed they understood the strategy of war. But they had never encountered an opponent that fought with complete disregard for personal safety when defending something they loved. They had never encountered soldiers who moved with the kind of precision that came from collective purpose. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 17 minutes. The Calthea's defenses were formidable, but they were designed to repel weapons and technology. They were not designed to withstand opponents who moved as a unit, who communicated without radio, who anticipated movements before they happened. Humanity's soldiers, linked by biological neural interfaces developed in the past 3 weeks, operated as something between individual warriors and a single organism. The Calthea, accustomed to hierarchical command structures, could not respond to this approach. When the bay doors opened and the human soldiers emerged from their landing craft, Marcus felt something shift in his small chest. He did not understand what was happening. The Calthea around him were agitated, moving with sudden chaos. Alarms blared in frequencies that hurt his ears. The creatures who had been studying him for 17 days suddenly seemed small and afraid. A figure in powered armor moved through the chaos with the kind of focused intensity that transcended species barriers. The armor was not elegant. It was functional and devastating. It was piloted by a human woman whose eyes had not seen her son in 17 days, and whose neural link connected her to the intentions of 16 other human soldiers. Sarah Chen did not think about tactics or strategy. Her armor's AI handled those calculations. Sarah's mind was entirely occupied with one question: where was Marcus? She found him in a secondary examination chamber, strapped to a table, surrounded by instruments. The Calthea guard in the chamber raised a weapon. Sarah's response was not hesitation. It was not mercy. It was the focused, devastating response of a mother who had found her child and who would suffer no further interference. The Calthea fell. Sarah removed her helmet. Despite the powered armor still surrounding her, despite the chaos of combat continuing elsewhere in the ship, Marcus recognized her immediately. Recognition shifted to understanding, and understanding shifted to relief. She was alive. She was here. Everything was going to be okay. Sarah's hands, as she unstrapped her son from the examination table, were shaking. Not from fear, but from something deeper, from the fundamental truth that had always driven her research. Humans survived because they adapted. Humans succeeded because they learned. Humans would never stop fighting for their young. The extraction was clean. The human forces moved through the Calthea vessel with precision, securing Marcus and eliminating any remaining threat. By the time the 17 soldiers returned to their ship, the Calthea were beginning to understand the scope of their mistake. They had taken a human child. In doing so, they had activated something in humanity that transcended technology or biology. They had activated the oldest survival instinct in the species, the protection of the young. Marcus, wrapped in a thermal blanket aboard the human vessel, asked his mother why the tall purple creatures had taken him. Sarah, her arm around her son, told him the truth. They had not understood what they were doing, but she had made sure they would never make that mistake again. The aftermath of the Calthea incident reshaped human civilization in ways that no one could have predicted. The incident itself lasted only weeks, but its effects cascaded through human society for years. The Calthea Dominion, upon receiving reports of their flagship's destruction and the death of Commander Vexthar, made a strategic decision that surprised military analysts across the galaxy. They withdrew. Not in defeat, but in recognition of a fundamental truth. The Calthea were designed to conquer populations. They were not equipped to defeat opponents who would sacrifice everything to protect their young. The United Nations released a statement drafted in 17 languages, broadcast across every communication channel Earth possessed. The message was simple. Any species that attacked a human child would face a unified response from Earth. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, no time for bureaucratic delays. The strongest military powers on Earth, who had competed with each other for centuries, would stand united against any threat to human young. For Marcus, the 6 months following his abduction were an adjustment that many psychologists thought he would not survive. He had spent 17 days among alien creatures, subjected to uncomfortable examinations, isolated from everything familiar. The prediction was trauma, developmental delays, psychological damage that might never fully heal. Instead, Marcus surprised everyone, which was exactly what he had been surprising people with since birth. Marcus took the knowledge he had gained and turned it into questions. He wanted to understand the Calthea. He wanted to know why they had taken him. He wanted to comprehend the vast differences between species. His mother, watching her son process his trauma through curiosity rather than fear, found new purpose in her research. She received funding to study not just human cognition, but comparative cognition, the study of how different species learned and adapted. Sarah established the Institute for Extraterrestrial Understanding, and her first research project was funded by every major nation on Earth. Understanding how humans could communicate with other species while maintaining clarity about human values. The Institute's unofficial motto became the words that Sarah had spoken to Marcus. They had not understood what they were doing. Sarah's mission became ensuring that the next species humanity encountered would understand. The global response to the incident created unified space programs and unified military research. For the first time in human history, the nations of Earth pooled their resources without conflict, focused on a single goal, ensuring that humanity would be prepared for any threat that came from the stars. Technology advanced at an exponential rate. Human weapons capabilities increased. But more importantly, human culture changed. Humans had always known, on some fundamental level, that they would protect their young at any cost. But the Calthea incident took that knowledge and made it the foundation of human interaction with the wider galaxy. Other species had empires and territorial disputes and resource conflicts. Humans had a red line that transcended every other consideration: never harm a human child. Marcus grew up in a world that had forever changed. He became a scientist, like his mother, but his field was exobiology, the study of life beyond Earth. He published his first paper at age 17 on the social structures of the Calthea, based on interviews with the few surviving members of the flagship's crew who were captured during the incident. His analysis was brilliant and empathetic. He understood the Calthea because he had been among them, because his mind had adapted to their presence just as it adapted to everything else. But more than his scientific work, Marcus became a symbol. He was the human child who had been taken by alien invaders and who had lived to tell the story. Every human child who feared the dark or the unknown could look at Marcus and see that humans survived. Every species that approached human space received a simple message through every available channel: do not target human young. The consequences would be absolute. 10 years after the incident, Sarah stood with Marcus in the observation deck of the first true human spacecraft, a vessel designed and built by humans specifically to explore the stars. It was not a weapon, though it could serve as one. It was not a colony ship, though it could become one. It was an ambassador, a message in physical form sent from Earth to the galaxy. Humans are here now, and we will protect what matters to us. Marcus looked out at the stars and asked his mother the same question he had asked when he was 7, whether anyone else was out there looking back. Sarah smiled because now she could give him a different answer. They were out there, They were watching, and they had learned that when you looked back at humans, you had better do so with respect. The species that had once wondered if they were alone in the universe had learned a terrible, beautiful truth. They were not alone, and they would defend their place in the universe with every ounce of strength their bodies possessed. The Caltier Dominion, in their retreat to the outer reaches of the known galaxy, issued no formal apology, but they did issue a warning to all other species. Do not target human young. Not because humans were weak and had to be pitied, but because humans were willing to reshape their entire civilization around the protection of their offspring. In the vast darkness of space, where countless species competed for resources and power, this made humans the most dangerous predators of all. And somewhere in the human solar system, in a facility orbiting Mars, young children played games that simulated combat scenarios they would never fight. They were learning, adapting, preparing, not out of aggression, but out of the simple, ancient truth that had driven human evolution. The species that best protects its young is the species that survives. The Calfier had meant to take a specimen. They had taken something far more dangerous. They had activated humanity's strongest instinct. They had threatened a human child. They would regret it for generations.